Welcome to the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This podcast is dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like all the best bookshops, this podcast is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. So tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book at the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. I'm Stacey Horan, author, book lover, and host of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet. This is episode number 219. For more information about this or any of our episodes, go to my website, staceyhoran.com. If you enjoy the podcast, leave us a review, like us on social media, and share us with your friends, family, and fellow readers. In today's episode of the Bookshop at the End of the Internet, I'm chatting with author Stephen Joseph about his new Snoodles series for young readers. Book 1, Snoodles in Space, a Snoodle, the Zoodle Kidoodles, and One Happy Schmoodle, as well as Book 2, Snoodles in Space, the Zoodles Strike Back, are available now. Stephen Joseph has been an attorney for 38 years, and he admits to never having had any plans to write books. As of the date of this episode, he's written 6 of them. Though the Snoodle series is for young readers, he's also written books for adults that focus on what he describes as the power of crankiness. In his CrankaTsuris books for adults, Stephen encourages readers to embrace their crankiness through stories derived from his work as a lawyer and his life in general. As you can imagine, all of his stories are told with his signature humor. In this episode, I'll chat with Stephen about his writing journey, the experiences he had collaborating with the illustrator on his Snoodle books, and how he begins his daily writing while out on his 2-hour morning runs, as well as a few other things coming up. Stephen Joseph, I want to thank you very much for joining me today on the podcast.
My pleasure.
I thought what we could do today is start by talking about your new series for kids, Snoodles in Space. You've got books 1 and 2 out. Can you tell us a little bit about these 2 books? And let's take them in order. And I'm curious, what inspired you to start writing them?
Well, okay, so this is actually the 3rd book that is now out, Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, the Zoodles Strike Back. And I'm an attorney. I was not planning to write these books, so, and now it's just going to be this is my 6th book out. And what inspired it's kind of an evolution. So I started out writing. My first book was The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrant CrankaTsuris, and that in Tsuris, it's not Saurus, but Tsuris, because that's the Yiddish word for problems. And it's a story about the smallest dinosaur on the planet, who was actually the dangerous dinosaur on the planet, because she kept cranking out all her tsuris till all the other dinosaurs dropped dead. And all humans evolved from this dinosaur, and that's why we're all cranky. And I started writing a blog on crankiness after that, because somebody commented that I didn't talk enough about overcoming crankiness, and I was all about embracing our crankiness. Then I wrote a book, A Grown-Up Guide to Effective Crankiness, the CrankaTsuris Method. That was my next book. And then I had this idea with Snoodles, Kidoodles, Poodles, and lots of noodles. I just had this crazy story in my head about this world where everybody was cranky because they drove around in the Krautmobile, which ran on sauerkraut, and made everybody stinky. You know, you drive around in the Krautmobile all day, and you smell like sauerkraut. You come to work, it'll be pretty cranky. And then the Snoodle was invented. It runs on noodles, and you could just go to the Ramenoleum and fill up your car with noodles. So that was the first book. And the funny thing is, like, I think I'm done. Okay, wow, I got this book out. And then this other story comes in my head Snoodles in Space, because I'm still writing stories on my blog. I'm still writing other things, and things evolve. Where I came up with this Snoodles in Space story, and part of it is my illustrator. I work very closely with my illustrator, Andy Case, who lives in Nottingham, England. And he loves the stuff. He goes, "This is the best stuff I ever done. You have to write another one." And I go, "I don't have anything. I have nothing. I can't write anything." And then I wake up the next morning, I have the story. So he keeps pushing me. And because he keeps pushing me, I keep writing. And then I came out with this book, which is a follow up to the last book, the Snoodles in Space, Episode 2, the Zoodles Strike Back.
So that's quite an evolution, going from no books to now 6.
Yes.
Okay, well let's start with the Snoodles books, because these are books for kids. So I'm curious, was the idea did it just come to you for kids, or was there something in the back of your mind that said, "I'd like to write something for kids," and the idea kind of flowed from there?
Well, everything like the first Snoodles book was uh, part of like just like a blog story, and because I write about crankiness, I'm an attorney, and I understand you were an attorney too, and I
Mhm.
always tell people about attorneys, like about law school, how law school works. The first year, they teach people how to get on people's nerves. And the second year of law school, we learn how to rub people the wrong way. And the third year of law school, we learn how to get underneath people's skin. And when you could do all three things at exactly the same time, you're a lawyer. So, so the thing about that is, I manage lawyers. I'm an attorney myself, and I've been doing this for 38 years. And you could get kind of cranky doing all that stuff. So then, I start writing these things. Primarily just getting more into storytelling. And again, the Snoodles one was like a moment in time. In that the first Snoodles book, we have this art restoration person who he scratches the paintings to restore art in a weird way. He has good nails, and he kept saying, "I barely scratched the surface." So it was like a feeling in time where, like, I had tons of work on my day job, and I felt like I was barely scratching the surface. And then I was dreaming of noodles, and then start thinking about all the words that rhyme with noodles: poodles, cadoodles, zoodles, schmoodles. And then I just went with it. And I love doing it. It's just also love working with an illustrator. There's nothing like writing an adult book versus a kid's book. It's so much fun because you do a story, and then you have the story blocks, and then you describe what you want in the story in each page for the illustrator. I just was on a Zoom call yesterday with Andy, and we're going back and forth with ideas, and it's that collaboration, which is so different than writing just a straight adult book. The collaboration between the illustrator and the author, it's magical. And the other thing about it for the author is it's like Christmas every day, where he'll send me a picture. It's like, wow, how did he do that? It's just like it's amazing. It's such a joy to do that. And it's just, when you have that experience, you just want to keep going on and on and on.
Well, what are your plans then for this series? Like you mentioned, you started with one book and then you had the idea for this Snoodles in Space book. So there's 2 books out now. Do you plan on writing more of these, or are there other subjects, other characters that are coming into your head?
Well, there is Andy Case, my illustrator. He's working on the next book, which is Snoodles in Space: Escape from Zoodle Traz. So that's already written. It's being drawn up, and that should come out next year. And I'm very excited about that. And in that story, one of the challenges when you're writing a series and you have these characters, and there's every book has more and more characters. And so this book is this Zoodle Strike Back, how I recap the story in the beginning, has a movie theater theme, like previously in Snoodles in Space, and it kind of tells a story. In the next book, I have almost like a Macy's Day Thanksgiving parade, and the characters are up in balloons. And the mayor is giving the state of the city sort of speech and talking about the heroes of Noodleham. And then the story begins. So, I would love this to be like an animated series. And Escape from Zoodletraz is going to be really a lot of fun because Zoodletraz is on this huge asteroid that has this lake, and it's kind of like a crazy place. And you have the trash can cats there, and are making music. And he's also a musician, so he's creating music to go along with the book,
Oh, really?
which is a lot of fun.
How do you keep track of the terminology? Because I mean, it's a tongue twister just to even get the title out. How do you keep track of it all?
Uh, I don't know. I don't like in the next book. There's a lot of oodles, a lot of different. There's like in this book, there's Droodle the poodle. Every book has a new poodle. So the next book has Floodle the poodle. They have Tina and Tony Takadoodle, the Groodle Cheeseadoodle, the jalapeno pepper popper doodle. It's trying to keep track. Yeah, it's getting, yeah, it gets bigger and bigger. So, but it's fun. It's amusing, and then like trying to say like in the last book, Sauer Krudelman invented the prickly peppered purple propulsion powered pickle. And again, it's a tongue twister, but I've said so many times I don't have a problem with it.
Well, it certainly sounds like it would be fun to write, which is, I'm sure, a welcome contrast to the day job
Yes,
of lawyering and managing lawyers.
yes.
What do your colleagues think of you writing about Snoodles and crankasauruses and all that stuff? Are they
Uh,
surprised?
I don't know if they're surprised. I guess they're impressed.
Mm,
It's fun for like book sales. Having a like bringing in your book and like bringing in bagels and having like a book release party at the office, which is always fun.
right, right. Do you ever get pitched ideas from your colleagues? Since it sounds like some of your story ideas stem from your experiences and your feelings evolving from the day job.
Well, in Cranky Superpowers, a lot of that gets inspired by my day job as a lawyer. So I always get an idea. So I'll go to a mediation, and the mediator would come in and say, "Don't shoot me. I'm just a messenger." So I end up writing a chapter, "Shoot the Messenger, CrankaTsuris." So like, and I always say, if I needed a messenger, I used to be a messenger. It's like I got paid like minimum wage. This guy charges $500 an hour. So I actually ended up talking about how we need to shoot the messenger. So a lot of things. So that's like an example of being inspired by work. And I actually writing a legal book next. That's my next thing on the list. The defense can now rest. The macro approach in other ways to take power in litigation and negotiation. So that's my next book.
And that sounds more serious.
It's serious, but there's also humor in there.
Yeah.
So like just for example, like I manage lawyers, and a lot of them once in a while I hear they say we have to fight fire with fire. And I go, oh, this is interesting. So I went to the fire department, and I walked up to the fire chief, and I said, hey, what high impact explosives do you use to put out fire? I want to start smoking in bed. How much like lighter fluid do I have to put on the mattress? And he told me they use water. Could you believe it? Who knew such a thing? So, but this is a serious point where I always, when I'm managing cases, I go, where's the water? It's crystal clear. It puts out the fire. And that's what I'm looking for. That's the point. But I do have like a funny story. a funny kind of thing in there to make the point, amplify the points I want to make.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's talk about cranky superpowers. Because again, I'm curious, what was the spark? What was, take me back to the very first idea you had regarding writing about crankiness.
Yeah, again, it was about some critics said I didn't talk about enough about overcoming crankiness,
Mm.
and the whole point was to embrace crankiness. So I started just writing about things that came into my head, and then it evolved into more stories. So in Cranky Superpowers, I have all different kinds of stories where, like, I love, I have Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock, and Mr. Spock is interviewing for the job of first officer. And Captain Kirk wants to know whether Mr. Spock can give him his word that he'll be loyal and faithful and do what he's supposed to do. And Mr. Spock says, "I can't give you my word." And he talks about the leader of his planet, because he's a Vulcan, the planet Vulcan, how there's a leader who kept saying, "I'll give you my word." And he went to war with the Romulans, and that didn't turn out very well, but he kept saying, "Give you a word." But he gave so many words out, he no longer can communicate. So on the planet Vulcan, the law is that you have to keep your word instead of give your word. And if you give your word, it's, especially if you're a politician, it's punishable by death. So things like that. I do the three little pigs with Inky, Pinky, and Stinky. And Stinky was they were in university, and Stinky was listening to lecture how to put lipstick on a pig. And Stinky was thinking, "Oh, that's really silly. Why would you want to put lipstick on a pig?" That's just so. So Stinky started daydreaming and thinking about playing in the mud, and then got the idea of making bricks and build this brick house, which ended pretty badly for the big bad wolf. So again, it's like just like kind of coming up with different ideas, uh, like and making it fun, but with a serious point about how to deal with our crankiness.
And do you have more books planned? Do you plan to continue the blog in that same vein? What are your plans for the whole crankiness avenue of your writing?
I would guess that there's still a lot more. It's still like there's so much more to write. I did write a recent blog, Lost in Translation, CrankaTsuris, which is not in any of the books. And whatever inspires me, again, like I don't, I it's like it's not planned. It just happens. I'm a runner, so, and I'm a marathon runner as well. And I'll actually run like 2 hours every morning. So when I go out running, ideas literally come in my head, and then I start writing while I run it. And the best thing is when you have characters start talking to you, and I just watch the characters, and they're doing the talking. I'm just watching. I actually have a serious book in my head because I have a friend who's a trial consultant, and she wanted to write a book with me, and of course she would be a character in this. And she's a trial consultant in New York City, so the I was thinking I have to make her uncomfortable, and I have to put her in a different environment. So I'm thinking about Paris, and then for some reason, I Googled anti-Semitism, France, and I found two interesting stories about murders in Paris. And then her father actually was a pharmaceutical executive. So now I'm thinking about this pharmaceutical executive who's wrongly accused of murder in Paris. And and her grandmother lived in Paris, and she's one of the characters. So, so I have this whole thing in my head where I just want to know what happens. So that kind of leads me to write the story. Just that's the story I want to write about, but I have to do some research.
Yeah. So when you're on these long runs and these ideas come to you, how do you hold on to them? Or is that the trick? If the idea sticks with you through the entire run, then it's worth writing about. Or do you have to stop or dictate or take notes or how
No, I
does it
don't.
work?
I like it. It just builds.
Mm,
It is when I get an idea and there's the one lightning bolt idea that, oh wow, that's really good. So in Snoodles in Space episode 2, the Zoodles Strike Back, I was thinking of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and I was thinking about in that story how they make Charlie such a nice kid, but there was a media frenzy, and you have the bad kids who it didn't turn out too well for them because they took things they weren't supposed to. But you never hear about them. And I'm guessing that the media just ate them up, like this, so they made them like humiliated them essentially. So I was thinking about that. Oh, I could work with that, and I made those kids into the heroes, and that's what this book is about. Where they were, it's Frimpy Frumpy Fruitle and Wimpy Whiny Woodle. Frimpy Frumpy Fruitle had a Fitsy Witsy Doodle. First he fits, then he wits, and then he went pop. And Wimpy Whiny Woodle has a Swizzly Twizzly Slimadoodle. First she swizzled, then she twizzled, and then she turned into a bucket of slime. And the newspapers were all over that. It was terrible, but they uncovered a plot to poison the water supply with evil Cadoodle, and they became the heroes at the end. So I love they became presidents of the school, their high school. So I love the thought of redemption, that sort of thing. That's one of the things. Sauer Krudelman is kind of despised at one point, and he becomes the hero in the book, in the previous book. So I love taking characters that people look, just shake their head, and then they kind of are kind of redeemed, which is a nice feature. So again, so I have the idea of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and it's go, wow, that's a great idea. And then I start thinking, okay, I need characters. So who are these people? What's going to happen? And then I have actually a new car, the Grudel, which runs on gruel, and their father, Grumpy Grimy Grudelman, and so everything comes together once you have the one idea, and then it builds and builds and builds, and it's almost like I can't wait to go out for my next run because something's going to happen.
So what is the actual writing process? At what point do those ideas get put down on the page? Do you wait to write until basically the story is formed in your head, or do you sort of write these bits and then stitch them together when you feel like the story has?
I love cooking. That's another thing. My passion. I love cooking, and it has to have all the ingredients, and it has to
Mm-hmm.
be, how you put things together and make something really delicious. So I have the same way of thinking when I'm writing. So I'm thinking like the ideas build in my head over the course of a number of runs. And then when it's finally done, when, okay, I could take it out of the oven sort of thing, or actually with writing, I start writing, maybe you call it putting in the oven. But that's what happens. That's the process where I feel like it's complete or close to complete. I could tell you there's times where while I'm writing, I have like a little bit more salt, and and you taste it. That's good.
So how much editing do you end up doing once the draft is written, or is your draft fairly edited by the time you get it down?
It depends. There's a process. I'll have it in my head, and it's finally done, and I might write a blog. It first shows up
Mm-hmm.
on my blog, and then after I read the blog, I see some typos. Okay, fix the typos. And then when it becomes putting into a book, like so Cranky Superpowers, I'm reading it again, and there might be a fresh idea that comes to my head, or I could expand on it. I know with a grown-up guide to effective crankiness, the editor says keep write your thought, expand, so not to be timid in your words. So if I have another riff, sort of funny riff, I'll throw it in. So it there's different levels of editing that I do. And it depends on where it's going. So when my story is ready for a story block, now I have to think differently. With the kids' book, I write out a story, shows up in the blog, and that's fine. And then I'm writing the story blocks, and I have to think of what words to go on what page, and that becomes a different process because I can't just like throw in 5 million words in one page. I have to think about things how play out in the book.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned at the start of our conversation that you weren't planning to write these books, but I'm curious, have you always been a writer? I mean, is this ultimately something you wanted to do and but never really thought about it until more recently? Or was it a complete surprise? Was it not anything you ever thought of doing growing up?
Well, the thing how it worked. I first started writing. I This is back in 1995. I was asked to be a speaker at a practicing law institute seminar on accountants malpractice, and I said, "Great, I'll do it." I never did that before. This was fun, and he said, "Could you write 2 chapters for the book for the text?" I go, "Oh no, like I have to write two. Jeez." And I was intimidated. And he told me, if you ever want to be an expert about something, write about it. So then I started writing, and then when I started writing, I kept writing on negotiation at the time. So what happened? I kept writing from then on there mostly on legal stuff. And I've published a number of articles. I've written the book for the ABA on dispute resolution. So I did all that stuff. And then with the kids' books, it was funny what happened. My company was bought out by another company, and they sent me out to some leadership assessment program. I flew out to England and had to do these 2 days of tests on the computer in a castle in England, and they came back with the results, and they said on creativity, on a level of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, one being the lowest, I scored a 1. And on energy level, on the scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, one being lowest, I scored a 1. So, like, basically, and this was run by psychologists, so it's true. And the nursing home I was living in, no one ever told me that I was only a 1 in on energy and creativity, and I was hoping to get up to a 2, because then you can move up to assisted living, and they do all of those activities in assisted living. So that kind of got me more into finally getting into this sort of area, kind of being more creative.
Mm. So now that you've gotten a taste for writing creatively as opposed to just legal writing, do you have other goals for yourself? You mentioned you're writing another legal book, but do you have other goals, other things you'd like to do?
Other goals? Well, I like my goal is it's a dream, it's a goal, and actually it's for my illustrator because he's just amazing. I love him to death. It's just so the next book there's there's a reason that we start out the book with this parade and the characters are in the balloons. And I told Andy, my dream one day is that these characters, because it's such a world that we're creating, it becomes some sort of animated feature, something in different, like TV or whatever. And they become balloons at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade.
That's a good
And
goal.
that I could fly Andy from England to New York, and the day before the Thanksgiving Day parade, we could watch our characters' balloons blow up. and then being high in the sky. It's
Right.
just
Right. Yeah, that's a good goal. Okay,
yes.
so in the meantime, between now and then, if people want to learn more about you, the books, new releases, that kind of thing, where can they go to find you and that information?
Well, I have my website, stephenjosephauthor.com, and there is my blog on the CrankaTsuris blog. I'm beginning in the next couple of weeks a separate legal blog, the Defense Can Now Rest Lawyers blog, where I give tips on litigation and negotiation on that. So, but stephenjosephauthor.com is where you find me.
Okay,
And my books are all available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and anywhere else that you want to get a book.
awesome. Well, hopefully people will pick up Snoodles in Space, parts 1 and 2, and we will look forward to part 3 coming out next year, you said.
In 2025, yes.
Excellent, excellent. Well, Stephen, thank you for joining me today on the podcast. I want to wish you luck with the Snoodles books, Snoodles in Space, and your blogs and the CrankaTsuris series and everything that you have going on. Congratulations on everything you've accomplished so far, and best of luck with the rest of your writing journey.
Well, thank you for having me, Stacy.
The Bookshop at the End of the Internet is a podcast dedicated to helping book lovers discover new authors. Like any good bookshop, this podcast features a wide variety of books by the equally varied and interesting authors who felt compelled to write them. This podcast gives you a chance to meet these wonderful writers and discover your next must-read book. Listen to the authors describe their books and tell you their stories in their own words. My interviews feature books from all genres and authors from all walks of life, including those who are indie published as well as those published by small presses and large publishing houses. Looking for unique, not so easy to find books for yourself, a friend, or a book club? Tune into this podcast and find your newest favorite author or maybe a soon-to-be bestseller. This podcast, like all the best bookshops, is filled with all kinds of books and all kinds of authors. Tune in, browse around, find a new author, and discover a new favorite book. You never know what treasures you might find in the bookshop at the end of the internet.